Hi, it's Leah Brick. I'm here for another conversation from the couch today. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Barry McCarthy, and we're going to talk about sexuality and aging. It's an important topic, especially as I'm getting older, and so it's something that's important to me. And so I thought, who better to talk to about that than Dr. McCarthy, who's one of our preeminent experts. So thanks for joining me today.
Well, I'm really glad to be here. And as a 78-year-old male, I really do want to advocate for sexuality and aging.
Well, I think it's important to talk about what is healthy sexuality as we age. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I think there's two key elements in enjoying being sexual in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. Let me start off with the good news. The good news is that couples who stay sexual as they age report that they feel so much better about themselves as individuals and as a couple. They feel energized as a couple. They feel desired and desirable. I often say to people that the role of sexuality is a shared pleasure. That's the core role, and it allows you to feel special as people and as a couple. And the paradox is when you stop being sexual, and that's the bad news, is that about 1 out of 3 couples stop being sexual in their 60s, 2 out of 3 by the 70s. It really is an unnecessary loss. You lose that sense of a special connection. I often say to folks, you're better off investing in being a sexual couple than you are putting $200,000 into your retirement fund. It's going to improve the quality of your life. It's going to allow you to feel special, and it's going to allow you to feel desired and desirable. And that's the key element sexually, is not about performance, but it's about sharing pleasure as intimate and erotic allies.
Well, how do how do you do that? How do you bring that intimacy, pleasure, eroticism into your married life or your coupleship when maybe that hasn't been a part of your coupleship in the past?
Well, it's easier if it's been a part of your coupleship, but it's also possible to revitalize sexuality in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, even if it's been a disappointment or a problem in your adult life. And the way that you do that is you get rid of the old intercourse as a performance goal and an individual performance goal, and you replace it with the idea of sharing pleasure as a couple, and what we talk about as a good enough sex model of understanding there's a number of roles, meanings, and outcomes of couple sexuality throughout your life, but especially with aging.
Well, I guess what I'm curious about is what facilitates eroticism. How do you bring that into the relationship?
Well, there's a new mantra about sex. It's desire, pleasure, eroticism, and satisfaction. And eroticism needs to be integrated in couple sexuality. For so many people, and specifically men, eroticism is seen as separate from intimacy and pleasuring, rather than integrated with intimacy and pleasuring. And that eroticism belongs to the woman, not just to the man. So that one of the advantages of sex and aging is that it really does reinforce this idea of sexual equity rather than the traditional double standard where men are supposed to be more sexual than women. Remember, when couples choose to stop being sexual with aging, it's almost always the man's decision. And it isn't that he wants to stop sex, it's that he's lost his comfort and confidence with erections and intercourse. And that if you define sexuality as not just intercourse, but also sensual, playful, and erotic non-intercourse scenarios, you've got a really wonderful basis for staying sexual in your 80s.
Well, if you haven't had that as a part of your template in the past, and you're now wanting to bring that into your coupleship, where can people find those things? How do they learn how to be sensual and playful when they haven't talked about that in the past?
Well, the most important thing isn't just talking about it, it's actually enacting it, it's doing it and experiencing that. And that's what we emphasize in our book, couple sexuality after 60. And that is, you want to talk to each other, but you also want to be open to trying new things and playing with each other. To say, we're going to have 1 or 2 sensual dates, prohibition on intercourse and orgasm. We're going to have 1 or 2 erotic dates with a prohibition on intercourse, but not a prohibition on sharing pleasure and sharing eroticism. So you have a new language in which to convey your feelings, convey your requests, convey what you are trying to do to feel more vital and more satisfied as a couple. And one of the most important things is that when sex does not flow to intercourse, rather than panicking or apologizing, you turn towards your partner as your ally and you say, let's have a sensual date, or let's have an erotic date, rather than leaving in a negative way.
I think that's a really important point. To the whole point of that your time together doesn't have to lead to penis vagina intercourse. It can lead to just intimate touch. And so many people don't recognize that that is a part of being a sexual being, that here we are just having some touch. It's not that we have to lead straight to penis vagina intercourse. It doesn't always have to go there.
Right. So many couples throughout their life have gotten into this pattern of not about sharing pleasure, but about making sure that intercourse works. And typically it's worked better for the man than the woman. Remember, 1 out of 3 women are never orgasmic during intercourse. That doesn't mean that they're not enjoying pleasure and not having orgasm with manual, oral, or rubbing stimulation. But I think the thing that is really fascinating is that one of the things that aging men learn to do is to piggyback his arousal on her arousal. Traditionally, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, asynchronous sex was better for the man than the woman. Now, asynchronous meaning it was good, but better for one partner than the other. That one of the things that happens in their 60s, 70s, and 80s is asynchronous sex is usually better for the woman than the man, and the man learns to piggyback his arousal on hers, so that they need each other in a way that they hadn't 10 or 20 years before.
Yeah, that's really important. Your conversation makes me think about Lori Mintz's book about becoming clitorate, and Emily Nagoski's
Right.
book, Come As You Are, both really great books for women and for men. I mean, I've read both of them, and I've said to my husband and my male friends, you need to read these books. These are really great books. So talking about the equality within orgasms.
And Emily's point, especially, Emily Nagoski's point, especially, that pleasure is the measure. That what sex is really about is sharing pleasure, not about performing for your partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned the good enough sex model. Tell me a little bit more about that. Tell our viewers more about that.
Well, ideally, what it says is that sensual, playful, and erotic is all sexual, not just intercourse. And it also says that sex can have different roles, different meaning, different outcomes. It doesn't mean that it always has to be perfect or always has to go one way or the other. But the biggest thing is that if you look at most aging couples, hopefully about 75 to 85% of their encounters will include intercourse. But when it doesn't include intercourse, no apologizing, no panicking. Turn towards your partner and say, let's make this a good time. Let's make it a sensual time. Let's make it an erotic time. And again, although the best sex is mutual and synchronous, most sex is asynchronous. And that's especially true with aging. In other words, better for one person than the other. But you can enjoy that kind of sexuality. Sex with aging is freer, more genuine, more satisfying. All the good things about sexuality take place in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you're open to it, allow that to happen.
Where can we find some resources? You mentioned your book. So tell us where we can find some resources as we age. I know you've got a fantastic book that I've read about erectile dysfunction. It was really helpful to give me some information that I needed.
Well, that's right. You know, for most men, by the time they hit 60, they're not like they were in their teens and 20s. They don't have totally predictable, reliable erections. And so they feel less sexual. But the reality is that sex can be better. He can be a better lover for them as a couple. And the two big resources that I suggest is the aging book for couples, Couple Sexuality After 60. But for men specifically, it's either Michael Metz's book, Coping with Erectile Dysfunction, or it's our book, Contemporary Male Sexuality. The notion is you want to be a proud sexual man. You don't want to apologize for yourself for saying it was better when it was totally predictable. It wasn't better when it was totally predictable. As a couple, sex is more genuine and more satisfying when you need each other more. And that's what happens with aging.
Well, I think the other piece of that with aging too is your stresses are different, right? So in most cases, your children are gone and you don't have those to worry about, is somebody going to walk in, or is somebody going to knock on the door, or do we have enough time, or am I not tired enough because I've been taking care of the kids, or
And you can
whatever
be
it is.
sexual in the morning or in the afternoon rather than late at night when the kids are asleep.
That's right. That's
It
right.
really is a time where you can be more free with your body and with pleasure-oriented touching.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should be sure our viewers know?
Well, I think one of the most important things, especially for women, because we've talked a lot about men, with women, as Lori Mintz said, that it's easier to be orgasmic with manual, oral, or rubbing stimulation and enjoy that, or enjoy multiple stimulation before and during intercourse. And that one of the things that women like about being sexual with aging is the idea that your partner needs you more than they did when you were in your 20s and in your 30s and in your 40s. It truly is more of a sharing of pleasure, and it's a turning toward each other, whether the sex was wonderful for both of you, it was better for one of you than the other, or it wasn't, it was mediocre and dysfunctional. You still turn toward each other as intimate and erotic friends.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's probably one of the things that we, as we age, can impart to our younger cohorts, right? That we really do need each other, and we can be great sexual partners with each other.
Right.
Well, I thank you so much for spending time with us today and just talking just briefly about aging and sexuality and why it's so important as a topic, and why we need to talk about it as we age. We need to make sure that that's still a part of our healthy conversations around sexuality.
And that the essence of sexuality is pleasure, not performance.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's key. Well, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on our many walks through life.
Great. Thank you.